Humanity had always known that it was different from the other species of the galaxy. There was something raw about them, something unpolished. They were a species of contradictions, capable of great acts of kindness, yet also acts of unparalleled destruction. They could be a force of creation and devastation, all in the span of a single breath. So when the Galactic Council gathered to decide the fate of Earth and its people, it was no surprise that fear gripped their hearts. The Council was composed of some of the most ancient and powerful species in the universe, each one with their own rich history and sense of superiority. They had watched over countless civilizations, guiding them, nurturing them into advanced beings who shared their vision of peace and unity. And so when they looked at humanity, they saw a species too unpredictable to be trusted, too volatile to be part of their perfect vision for the galaxy. The decision was swift and absolute. Humanity would be exiled from the known universe, cast out to the farthest reaches of space, where no council member's influence could touch them. They would be isolated on their barren planet, with no allies, no resources, nothing but the dirt beneath their feet and the stars above to remind them of the greatness they could never touch again. They would be forgotten, a speck in the vastness of the universe. Far from the civilizations that had risen in the Council's light, the humans would be left to fade into obscurity. And yet humanity refused to accept this fate. They had not fought their way through centuries of struggle, only to be cast aside like unwanted debris. No, they would not go quietly. The moment the decision was made, a low rumble began to stir beneath the surface of Earth, a quiet anger that would not stay buried for long on the surface. The world continued to turn with the same frenetic energy that had always defined humanity. Their leaders rallied their people. They reassured them that they would rebuild their nation, their culture, their way of life. They told them that Earth was still theirs to protect, but beneath the surface, beneath the carefully crafted speeches and hollow promises, something else was growing, a fire that had been smoldering for generations, and now it was ready to burst into flame. In the days that followed the announcement of the exiled, governments scrambled to maintain order. Some factions tried to appease the Council, others sought to fight back. But all of them knew deep down that humanity was no longer just a species surviving. They were a species awakening, a dormant force that had been held back for far too long. Humanity began to change in subtle ways. First, it was the engineers and the scientists. They poured their energies into advancing their technologies. They scavenged through old warships, they studied alien debris, and began to rebuild what the Council thought they had destroyed. Soon new designs began to emerge, faster, sleeker, more efficient ships capable of navigating the furthest reaches of space without the need for a centralized government to control them. The next step came when former military commanders gathered in secret meeting halls, their voices low and serious. They knew what had to be done. They would not remain in exile forever. They would fight back. And so in the shadow of the Council's decision, something incredible was born, a hidden armada. Far from the Council's watchful eyes, humanity was preparing for something far greater than anyone could imagine, a return that would shake the galaxy to its core. The time would come when they would show the galaxy what it meant to be human, and they would not be cast aside any longer. Years passed since the banishment, and the universe began to forget the humans exiled to the fringes of the galaxy. The Galactic Council continued to thrive, untouched by the small thorn it had cast away into the wilderness of space. For the most part, the humans were left to their isolation, forgotten by those who once feared them. But there was always a hum beneath the surface, a pulse of determination that refused to die in the void where humans had been sent. They did not sit idle, they did not simply wait, they forged ahead, with a single goal in mind, to prove they belonged not just to their home planet, but to the stars themselves. In the beginning it was hard. No one had ever thought the humans would make it, but they did what they always did. They adapted, they rebuilt from the ashes of their old wars, from the scraps of alien ships they had found. They learned, they survived in ways that would have shocked the Council. Their ingenuity was beyond anything their enemies had anticipated. The humans became masters of their environment, taking barren worlds and turning them into makeshift hubs of innovation and industry. They didn't wait for a leader to tell them what to do. Instead, they created a network of engineers and scientists who worked tirelessly in hidden underground bunkers scattered across distant planets. The quiet hum of machinery and the flicker of lights in these isolated workshops became the heartbeat of the new human resistance. The people who had been exiled began to change as well. Their spirit transformed from one of despair into one of fierce resolve. Their communities grew stronger, their families more tightly knit. They no longer saw themselves as castaways. They were explorers of the unknown. They were survivalists, thriving where no one thought they could. As human colonies began to flourish across the forgotten edges of space, they began to exchange information, share resources, and come together in ways that the Council never thought possible. They began to build something new, not just out of necessity, but out of pride. It was in the depths of this self-imposed exile that Lynn Harrison came to prominence, a young engineer with a spark of brilliance that no one could ignore. Harrison had been raised in the shadow of humanity's exile and had witnessed firsthand the resilience of his people. He was determined to change their fate. While others had spent years trying to forget the past, Harrison couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy had only seen a fraction of what humanity was capable of. He knew that Earth's exile was only a temporary setback, and he devoted himself to one goal: to create the technology that would bring humanity back to the galactic stage. Lynn's work was unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. He had unlocked the secrets to quantum propulsion systems, something that had once been considered impossible for human technology to achieve using scraps of ancient alien tech. He had found a way to create faster-than-light travel. He worked in secrecy deep within an underground facility on a barren moon, far from the prying eyes of the Council. His team of engineers worked day and night, tirelessly pushing the boundaries of science and physics to create something no one had thought possible. They built new ships, new weapons, new technologies faster than anyone could comprehend. They were preparing for something that no one could predict. One fateful evening, Lynn stood before his creation, a ship unlike any that had ever been seen before, sleek and deadly, capable of moving across galaxies with speed and precision, a symbol of what humanity had become, a symbol of defiance. Lynn knew that this was only the beginning. His people had been cast aside once, but now they would rise again, and the galaxy would have no choice but to take notice. The moment humanity had spent years preparing for had finally arrived. The ship that Lynn Harrison and his team had built was ready, and with it, a wave of determination surged through the human colonies. The first strike wasn't supposed to be a declaration of war. It wasn't even supposed to be noticed, but it would make the galaxy remember who they were. They were no longer just a scattered species in exile. They were something far greater, something not to be underestimated. The target was small, just a lightly guarded alien trade route on the far edge of Council space. But to the humans, it was everything. It would be the first test of their power, a warning to the galaxy that humanity had not been forgotten. Lynn Harrison oversaw the operation from a command center built into one of the underground bases on a distant moon. As the first ships powered up, ready to strike, there was no turning back. The human fleet, small but deadly, consisted of only a handful of vessels, but they were technologically superior to anything the galaxy had seen before. The mission was simple: hijack a critical shipment of resources traveling through a well-established trade lane, and in the process, broadcast a message that would send ripples across the galaxy. These were not the random skirmishes of the past. These were precise, calculated moves. When the attack came, it was swift and brutal. The first ship, a sleek stealth vessel designed for speed, appeared out of nowhere, cutting through the starry void like a predator stalking its prey. The alien convoy, unaware, complacent, barely had time to react before the first human ship struck. With a series of expertly aimed blasts, the convoy was disabled, its cargo seized within moments. The humans didn't waste time on unnecessary destruction. The goal was not to create chaos, but to send a clear message. Humanity was capable of taking what it wanted and vanishing without a trace. In the cold silence of space, as the convoy's helpless crew watched, a transmission was sent out. It was a simple message, a single sentence, broadcast across all frequencies. "We are humanity. We have returned." The message echoed through the void. It wasn't just a challenge, it was a declaration that the Council's decision to exile humanity had been a mistake, a declaration that humanity would not remain in the shadows any longer. Across the galaxy, news of the attack spread like wildfire. The Council's allies were the first to react, with some dismissing it as a one-off event, a rogue group of exiles trying to reclaim relevance. But others, particularly those who had heard the stories, who had seen the rise of human ingenuity from the fringes, were far more concerned. The humans had been underestimated, and now it seemed they had a fleet capable of far more than anyone had realized. No longer was humanity simply a forgotten species. They had proven they could strike when least expected, and with devastating efficiency. The Council, however, dismissed the attack as an isolated incident. They didn't believe that a species that had been exiled and isolated for so long could ever pose a real threat. They saw the raid as an act of desperation, something that would quickly fade. But they were wrong. They failed to understand one simple truth. Humanity wasn't desperate. They were determined. Back on Earth, the exhilaration of the attack rippled through the human colonies. It was the first spark, the beginning of something far bigger. Lynn Harrison knew that this wasn't just a victory. It was a symbol. Humanity was no longer sitting quietly in exile. They had sent a message to the galaxy, and no one would forget it. The future, now more uncertain than ever, was theirs for the taking. The first strike had been a success, but it was only a taste of what was to come. Humanity's small fleet had disappeared back into the shadows after their raid, leaving the galaxy stunned and questioning their place in the larger scheme of things. The Council, still dismissing the humans as a mere nuisance, continued their business as usual. But the quiet, dangerous hum of human innovation did not cease. It only grew louder. Lynn Harrison and his team worked relentlessly in their hidden facilities. The fleet of ships they had initially built, designed for speed and stealth, was only the beginning. It had been a proof of concept, a test of their ability to strike without being detected. But now they needed something bigger, something that could truly challenge the might of the Galactic Council. Their weapons were refined, their strategies calculated, and their resolve was unwavering. It wasn't just about taking the small convoy anymore. Humanity's goal was much larger, to take back their place in the galaxy. Across human colonies on distant worlds, engineers and military commanders began to piece together something far more formidable: an armada. The ships were massive, more heavily armed and armored than any the galaxy had seen, designed to withstand the kind of warfare that would come when humanity finally made its return to galactic prominence. These weren't just ships. They were a statement that no one, not even the Council, could ignore. News of humanity's continued activity, their steady growth and power, began to spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Alien factions, previously skeptical or indifferent to the humans, started to take notice. There were whispers in dark corners of space, rumors that humanity's new fleet was not just a military force, but a carefully crafted, highly organized one capable of outmaneuvering anything the Council could throw at them. The Council, still sure of their superiority, kept their forces in place, assuming that humanity would either burn out or fail to pose a real threat. But the truth was, they were already too late. Lynn and his team had already perfected the quantum propulsion technology that allowed ships to travel faster than anything the Council had ever seen. No longer did they need to rely on slow, cumbersome ships to make their way through space. Humanity now had the ability to strike anywhere, at any time, with devastating speed. The first true confrontation came not from the human fleet directly, but from a small band of ships on the outskirts of Council territory. The humans launched a surgical strike on a key supply station in a neutral zone, a facility used by several Council races to resupply and refuel. It was a calculated move. No one was supposed to be hurt, but the damage to the Council's logistics would be enormous. The humans wanted to show that they could reach into the heart of Council space, without anyone ever knowing they were there. The attack was executed flawlessly. Ships that had once been thought of as mere scouts now appeared like ghosts, slipping into the system unnoticed, striking at the heart of the supply station. Within moments, the station was disabled, And the humans sent another message, this one far louder and clearer than before. We are not just a nuisance. We are coming. As the council scrambled to respond to the attack, they realized something they hadn't expected. Humanity was not just trying to survive. They were trying to dominate. They weren't merely rebelling. They were carving their own path into the galactic order. And in that moment, it became clear to the council. The humans weren't just exiles anymore. They were a rising power. The shockwaves of humanity's bold strike against the supply station reverberated across the galaxy. For the first time in years, the Galactic Council couldn't ignore the threat humanity posed. But as the Council's leaders scrambled to respond, something unexpected happened. They began to fracture. Old alliances that had once seemed unbreakable began to show cracks, and a subtle shift in the power dynamics of the galaxy was unfolding. Not every species in the Council was unified in their approach to humanity. In the wake of the attack, whispers began to spread among certain races that had long been skeptical of the Council's authority and the way it had treated humanity. These factions saw the humans not as a rogue group of exiles, but as a species that had been unjustly cast aside, their potential wasted by the Council's narrow-mindedness. There were murmurs of rebellion, not against humanity, but against the Council itself. Some factions began to question their loyalty to the Council. They asked themselves why they had supported the exile of a species that, even now, was proving itself capable of innovation and resilience. These smaller factions, once dismissed as insignificant, began to see an opportunity. If humanity could rise from the depths of exile, then maybe they, too, could challenge the outdated order of the Galactic Council. It wasn't long before these factions started to reach out to the humans, cautiously offering their support, whether it was in the form of intelligence, technology, or resources. Humanity had its first true allies in years, and they were in the shadows, hidden from the Council's prying eyes. But humanity didn't trust easily. They knew the stakes were too high to rely on blind alliances. Lynn Harrison, ever the strategist, was cautious. While the galaxy's political climate shifted, the humans had to remain focused. They couldn't afford to trust anyone too quickly, no matter how tempting it seemed. Behind the scenes, Lynn and his advisors worked tirelessly, preparing for the inevitable galactic conflict. They understood that it wasn't just about winning battles. It was about winning hearts and minds. The key was to build alliances, not just through brute force, but through diplomacy and shared goals. But even with their new allies, humanity was still outnumbered. The Council was vast, and its military might was still unmatched. Yet, Lynn knew that the galaxy had underestimated one critical element: humanity's determination. While Lynn focused on expanding human influence, the Council was facing its own internal chaos. As more races began to question the wisdom of their decision to exile humanity, the Council's leadership grew unstable. The once immovable forces that had governed the galaxy for eons were beginning to show signs of weakness. The Council's political machinery ground to a halt as debates raged over how to deal with the rising human threat. Some factions called for immediate military action, while others advocated for diplomacy, fearing the damage that an all-out war would bring to their own fragile economies and alliances. In this vacuum of leadership, a powerful individual within the Council, an influential admiral from a long-standing member race, began to take matters into his own hands. He saw the growing unrest within the Council and understood that humanity was not just a threat to be contained. They were a force that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. This admiral, once a staunch supporter of the Council's decision to exile humanity, now began to have second thoughts. Over time, his doubts festered, and he found himself increasingly sympathetic to the human cause. In secret meetings, this admiral began to contact human operatives, offering information that could tilt the scales in their favor. It was a risky move, but he believed that the galaxy needed a new order, one where humanity could play a part, not as exiles, but as equals. As the admiral's influence within the Council grew, he became a key ally to humanity, feeding them intelligence that allowed their forces to anticipate Council movements and gain strategic advantages. But the Admiral's actions were not without consequences. The Council began to suspect that something was amiss, and soon they turned their eyes toward him. His motives were questioned, and a dangerous game of political intrigue began. For humanity, this was just another reminder of how fragile the galaxy's power structure really was. One crack, one betrayal, and the whole system could come crashing down. The quiet instability within the Galactic Council soon reached a boiling point. Factions that had once been unified in their condemnation of humanity's exile were now splintering, torn between those who still clung to the belief in humanity's inferiority and those who had begun to see the potential in the exiled species. Meanwhile, the humans continued to build their strength, methodically refining their fleet and expanding their presence across the farthest reaches of space. The galaxy could no longer ignore them, and soon it would have no choice but to confront the inevitable. Humanity was coming for its rightful place. The turning point came when Lynn Harrison, ever the brilliant tactician, devised a plan that would force the Council to confront humanity head-on. He knew that the human fleet, while growing, still wasn't large enough to challenge the full might of the Council's warships. But what the humans lacked in numbers, they more than made up for in strategy. Lynn understood the power of surprise, and he planned to deliver it in the most devastating way possible. A strike at the very heart of the Council's military infrastructure. Lynn's plan was to target a key military staging ground, a vast, heavily fortified world where the Council had stored immense stockpiles of weapons, ships, and supplies. This was a bold move, one that would signal humanity's intent to go beyond small skirmishes and take on the full might of the Council's military. If successful, it would cripple the Council's ability to respond to further attacks, buying humanity the time they needed to consolidate power and secure their place in the galaxy. For the operation, Lynn brought together the best minds from across the human colonies, building a task force designed for one purpose: to break through the most heavily defended military installations the Council had. They had perfected their quantum propulsion systems, and now they would use these ships' unparalleled speed to execute a precision strike that would leave the Council reeling. On the eve of the attack, a sense of tense excitement filled the human fleet. The Armada had grown to include ships of all shapes and sizes, some massive, heavily armed destroyers, others sleek and fast interceptors, each ship reflecting the diverse nature of humanity's ingenuity and creativity. But the true strength of the fleet lay not in its firepower, but in its unity. Every captain, every crew member knew the stakes. This was their chance to show the galaxy that humanity could not, and would not, be ignored. The attack came without warning. The human fleet, moving with precision and grace, breached the outer defenses of the military world. The initial assault was swift and overwhelming, catching the Council's defenders off guard. The speed of the strike was so calculated, so perfect, that the Council's fleet barely had time to mobilize. The human ships, using their superior propulsion technology, darted between enemy lines, striking key targets with pinpoint accuracy. Within hours, the once impenetrable defenses had crumbled, and the Council's military stockpiles lay in ruins. The message was loud and clear. Humanity was not just a force to be reckoned with. They were a force that could turn the tide of the galaxy. The Council, still reeling from the unexpected assault, scrambled to regroup, but they knew one thing for certain. The game had changed. Humanity had shown them that they were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting to dominate, and they were doing it on their own terms. In the aftermath of the attack, news spread like wildfire. The human fleet had struck the heart of the Council's military, and they had done it with ease. The once proud Council, which had viewed humanity as little more than a footnote in the galaxy's history, was now faced with a terrifying reality. Their power was no longer absolute. A new era was dawning, and humanity was at its center. As Lynn Harrison watched the aftermath unfold, he knew that this was just the beginning. The galaxy would never be the same again, and neither would humanity. They had proven that they could face down the most powerful forces in the galaxy and emerge victorious. The road ahead would be hard, but for the first time in centuries, humanity had the power to shape its own future. The victory over the Council's military stronghold sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. The humans had struck with unparalleled precision, leaving the once unstoppable might of the Galactic Council reeling. For the first time, the galaxy's power structure was in doubt. The Council, once the undisputed authority over all known space, now faced a force they couldn't ignore. As the dust settled from humanity's bold assault, Lynn Harrison stood at the heart of the human fleet, watching the results of the strike unfold. His face was unreadable, but inside, he felt a burning satisfaction. The humans had done it. They had not only survived the exile that had been thrust upon them, they had thrived, adapted, and struck back in ways no one could have predicted. But the victory was just one step. The road ahead would be far more treacherous, and the Council's response would be swift and decisive. Across the galaxy, the Council began to rally its remaining forces. Though shaken, their pride had not been broken. The galaxy's most powerful races were determined to restore order and crush the human rebellion before it could grow too large. At the same time, cracks in the Council's unity began to widen. Some factions, still reeling from the attack, called for diplomacy, urging that the situation could be resolved without more bloodshed. Others, more traditional, called for full-scale war to quash humanity's uprising once and for all. In the midst of this turmoil, the Council's leadership remained fractured and indecisive, giving humanity a rare window of opportunity. Lynn knew that the longer they waited, the more likely the Council would recover. They needed to act swiftly, decisively, and with the kind of strength that left no room for doubt. The time had come to take the fight to the Council itself, to shatter the illusion of their invincibility once and for all. The humans had the momentum now, and Lynn was determined to see it through. In the wake of the assault, more alien factions began to reconsider their allegiances. The seeds of rebellion were being sown throughout the galaxy. Former enemies of humanity, species that had once feared the humans, now saw them as potential allies, or at the very least, a necessary force to disrupt the Council's hegemony. This created a strange, uneasy coalition of races that could prove invaluable to humanity's cause, but Lynn was cautious. He knew that some of these alliances were fragile, driven by fear or opportunism rather than genuine loyalty. Humanity could not afford to trust too easily. The admiral who had secretly aided the humans within the Council had become a key figure in this new phase of the conflict. His influence was growing, and with it, his willingness to act against the Council's orders. He knew that if humanity continued to gain ground, the balance of power in the galaxy would shift permanently. But his position within the Council was becoming precarious. His involvement with the humans was becoming harder to conceal, and it was only a matter of time before the Council would realize the depth of his betrayal. Still, for now, his secret communications with Lynn and his operatives were invaluable. The Admiral shared intelligence on the Council's upcoming moves, giving the human fleet a distinct advantage. The humans began to target the Council's strategic assets, striking at the heart of their remaining military forces and disabling key infrastructure. The humans weren't just fighting to survive anymore, they were fighting to reshape the galaxy. But the Council wasn't idle. As they reorganized, they began to deploy their greatest weapon, their flagship armadas. Massive warships, each capable of destroying entire fleets in a single stroke, were dispatched to confront the human threat. These colossal ships had been designed to crush any rebellion, to show the galaxy the absolute power of the Council. They were the last desperate stand of an empire that could feel its dominance slipping away. For Lynn, this moment was both terrifying and exhilarating. The time for small strikes was over. The humans were about to face the full force of the Council's wrath. But for the first time in years, humanity was not alone. The galaxy had begun to change, and the humans would be at the forefront of that transformation. As the fleets of both sides readied themselves for the impending conflict, the stage was set for the greatest battle the galaxy had ever known. Humanity was no longer the exiled underdog. It was a force to be reckoned with, and the time for reckoning had come. The final battle was upon them. Humanity's Armada, a force forged in secrecy and strength, now faced the full might of the Galactic Council. Across the galaxy, warships prepared for the clash that would decide not only the fate of the human race, but the future of all the galaxy. The Council had sent its flagship armadas to crush the rebellion once and for all, believing that they could extinguish humanity's flames of defiance. But they had underestimated the one thing that had always made humanity a force to be reckoned with: their unyielding will. Lynn Harrison stood at the helm of the largest ship humanity had ever constructed. The Resolute, a vessel as symbolically powerful as it was technologically advanced. It was humanity's statement to the galaxy that they had not only returned, but were now a force capable of reshaping it. Lynn gazed out at the growing fleet before him. Tens of thousands of ships, a coalition of races that had once feared the humans now fighting beside them for a new order. They stood as one against the Council's tyrannical rule. The communication systems crackled to life, and Lynn's voice echoed through the fleet, calm yet resolute. Today, we make history. We are not just fighting for survival. We are fighting for a future where we are no longer exiles but equals. Stand with me, and we will show the galaxy what humanity is capable of. A cheer rang out across the fleet. The time for words had passed. The time for action had arrived. The Council's flagship armadas loomed ahead, massive warships bristling with firepower. The Council had brought its best forces to bear, confident in their superiority. But what they didn't realize was that humanity had already cracked the code. The new ships had been built to be faster, smarter, and more adaptable than anything the Council had ever faced. They were built for this moment. A moment where the tide of the galaxy's history would turn. The battle began with a deafening roar. The human fleet surged forward, their ships darting in and out of the larger enemy formations with blinding speed. The quantum propulsion systems, perfected over years of trial and error, allowed them to cut through the Council's defenses with astonishing agility. Laser beams and missile fire lit up the space between the fleets, but the humans were always one step ahead. They knew how to fight on their own terms, how to strike from unexpected angles, how to outmaneuver the Council's once imposing forces. The first casualty was the flagship of the Council's fleet, the Colossus. A series of devastating strikes from human ships crippled its engines and weapons systems, sending it spiraling into the void. The Council's commanders were stunned. How had the humans gotten so strong, so fast? They had underestimated them, and now they were paying the price. But the true turning point came when the human fleet, under the command of Lynn, launched a daring assault on the Council's central command vessel, a massive space station positioned at the heart of their military operations. The Resolute, leading the charge, sliced through the remaining defenses with surgical precision. Lynn's heart raced as the station's shields began to flicker, and then, with one final blast, the central command fell. With the Council's leadership shattered, chaos erupted within their ranks. The admiral who had secretly aided the humans had been instrumental in spreading dissent and confusion among the Council's remaining forces. Many of the races that had supported the Council in the past now hesitated, unsure whether to continue the fight or surrender to the inevitable. One by one, their ships began to turn away, unable to fight for a cause that was already lost. The final blow came when Lynn's fleet delivered a decisive strike to the remaining Council capital ships. With the heart of the Council's military shattered and their leadership in disarray, the remaining forces scattered. The once unbreakable power of the Galactic Council had crumbled. The humans had won. The galaxy was theirs for the taking. But victory wasn't just about conquering the stars. It was about ensuring that this moment marked the beginning of something new. Humanity wasn't interested in becoming the new overlords of the galaxy. They had fought for freedom, for a place where they could shape their own future, not one dictated by a corrupt and outdated council. With the Council's fall, Humanity stood at the dawn of a new age. As Lynn Harrison watched the debris of the final battle drift away in the vacuum of space, he couldn't help but feel the weight of history upon him. They had been exiled, abandoned, and forgotten. But now, humanity was not just a part of the galaxy. They were its new foundation. The message to the galaxy was clear. Humanity had arrived, not to conquer, but to lead, and they would shape the future of the stars for generations to come.